CEO Action for Racial Equity Fellows. The fellows will identify and assess current policies in 4 key areas: healthcare, education, economic empowerment, and public safety, and then recommend how existing policies can be amplified, changed to meet their intended purpose, or propose new policies. Fellows will review policies through 4 key criteria: impact, effort, risk, and status. His efforts here were focused on constitutional, educational amendments, and national police reform. Jamie was a recipient of the 2013 Dr. James Robinson Equal Opportunity Award. This award was given to recognize a Penn State faculty or staff member who has contributed to the university by improving cross-cultural understanding. He has served as a panelist on topics ranging from social justice to student issues. He has been a keynote speaker for various leadership programs. Jamie has been published in various texts and is an editor on Rethinking Organizational Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, a step-by-step guide for facilitating effective change. Jamie serves as an assistant dean for diversity enhancement programs at the Smeal College of Business. He is a 1995 graduate of Morehouse College, where he obtained his BA in sociology. He acquired his MED with concentrations in adult education and instruction education from Central Michigan University in 2003. Jamie earned a Ph.D. in workforce education and development program with concentrations in organization design and human resource development from the Pennsylvania State University. Jamie's presentation title is Identifying Key Success Factors in Workplace Diversity. Jamie, thank you.
So thank you for that, Penny. And I didn't know you were going to read the whole thing, but I appreciate you reading it all the same. So today, I'm going to show my screen, but I have to go over a few ground rules, and it still did not work the way I wanted it to. Nevertheless, what we are going to do today is have this conversation about diversity in the workplace. And primarily, when we're talking about diversity in the workplace, it's important that we're able to have a conversation so that this does not become a similar conversation to what you may be used to, or when you have to hit those mandatory trainings. So in that regard, if you have questions or need to comment at any point, you all can see the slides okay?
No, when you put up your share screen, it just shows a website.
How about now?
Nope.
All right, that's part of the joy. Let's go.
When you do share screen, like I said, it's Wikipedia. It's showing your Wikipedia page.
I was just,
and maybe you need to share your whole screen or something.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
And I hope you're not recording all of this, because
yes, I am.
And I will come out of. How about now?
Nope.
You're still not seeing my screen.
Not seeing it.
Okay. Well, nevertheless, it said that we're not prepared for all kinds of things that happen and go wrong. What we're going to talk about today, though, is looking at key success factors in diversity in the workplace. Okay. So in doing that, and Penny, you may have the presentation already. I know I sent it to you. So if you have it, I didn't change anything, so we can work from there. But one of the things that's going to be important to understand is we're talking about diversity in a climate that is currently moving against diversity. And what I mean by moving against diversity, once we get the first slide, it was really the reason why I had the whole idea of the different Wikipedia pages about woke and everything else going on, is because we hear this word woke all the time, and work in the workplace, or work in the classroom, or you really hear critical race theory in the classroom. But you heard in one whole state, they just simply said, this is where woke goes to die. Well, we need to understand what that means and understand that this word is not a new phenomenon. If you saw like in the little clip for the Wikipedia, this word has been around since the 60s. 1962 is when they said, and usually it was taken from the African-American culture, talking about being awake or having an awakening. And in that moment, becoming woke, being woke. Now, how it got changed and how it got transitioned to something else, I don't know. But this is where we are right now. So before we begin the conversation, and I'm not, as you can see, I'm not technically adept, but I do have a question. And as we all are here, and you can put it right in your chat, should businesses be woke? Are businesses woke? Is this something that we are constantly looking at? And what are your thoughts on that? And you can either come off mic, come off mute, or you can put it right in the chat. And so as we go through that, I want you also to focus on the second part of the question, which is diversity important in corporate environments? Now we're asking first, based on the definition of being woken or awakened to what diversity means and understanding that in the workplace, but then also looking at what it could mean when it comes to business environments. All right, so Kevin already said absolutely. All right, I appreciate the one word, quick, concise response. But when you say absolutely, why is it absolute?
I don't think that you can do this work without trying to, you need to be aware. You need to understand what is going on. You need to be honest about that, to have the candid conversations that you need to have to create an inclusive culture that can actually work for the strategy, mission, and the vision of the business.
Okay, so, and that's the business case for diversity. And you would think that understanding that, because we understand by expanding the business case for diversity, that there are several things that when you have a diverse team, it causes different things to occur. It causes better output. It causes more engaged response from the organization. And remember, when we talk about OD, we bring in the whole community, not only top down, but bottom up. And we get that frozen middle thought. So we are constantly moving forward in how we're engaging in what we're doing. So in my research and what I came up with in terms of looking at how we can impact diversity in the workplace, we looked at 7 key success indicators or success factors. This is different or becomes different from a business practice because in that sense, a business practice, we're actually saying practice means we're going to tell you how to do it. But in this instance, I wanted folks to understand these are factors that can contribute to successful diversity implementation in the workplace. So when you're talking about it, the first would be resource groups. And we're going to go through each one of these at points in time. It's a resource group, mentoring, pipelines, timelines. And these two, the last two, those two work together almost. But also research, observations. And if any of you have had to go through those wonderful things known as a physical recently, you know the physician code of knowing thyself, right? Well, in this instance, as an organization, the organization has to know who they are. So we're going to talk about this. We're going to take some time for it. Penny, I saw you come back on. Did it come back up? Okay. So for all intents and purposes, resource groups, and many of you all know these things. And it's kind of like the Shakespearean quote, a rose by any other name is just as sweet. Well, think about this. We call resource groups affinity groups, business resource groups, employee resource groups. We use all these different names for them. But the one key thing that's important is that they're there for the benefit of the employees, not just for the supervisors, but also they're there for the sake of the employees getting to understand what the company means, how to engage, and what it means to be an employee there. What it also means is that these employees have a space to go. A lot of times you'll hear people say they don't leave companies, they leave people. We're on slide 5. If you go to it, you'll understand that these individuals within these organizations, as they're working through and going through all the changes, they have to figure out how they fit in. And sometimes there's not a place for them to do it, especially if they're not from that city, not from that state, not from that community. It becomes very difficult for them to blend in. So these employee resource groups use the idea of having a community in itself, an affinity group, to work from that could be all one gender, could be all one ethnic group, could be all one socioeconomic status, could be all one age range, where people can feel comfortable to ask questions. But what's also important to realize is there has to be a champion in this group. And that means someone from either the C-suite or just under that to engage and carry some of these efforts forward. Now, in this, we have to be careful with our employee resource groups or our affinity groups, because you don't want them to become a situation where everybody joins in and the group that you were trying to help out the most gets drowned. You have to ensure, and I'm saying you, but I really mean we have to ensure when these affinity groups are created that they're engaged and that they understand that their words are valid. Many employees will look to these resource groups as a place where they can go to have conversation, to ask sincere questions, and just find out what the process is. Remember, many employees may be new to the industry that they're going into and may not feel comfortable asking a counterpart from a different background. They also may not be comfortable just engaging because they don't know how the system works. Think about it. If you move from New York to Georgia, the cultures are different. If you were with us for the last presentation, you heard about, and Aditi, I see you at the top. Aditi says she likes to say good morning. Not everybody in New York wants to talk before they have that coffee. However, if you're in the South, when you walk in, you have to speak to everybody. I didn't say you should, I said you have to. Culture changes. ERGs provide this base of culture and knowledge to work from. So when you have that going on, and then at the top, you have these folks who are vested in bringing up the next group of people, this succession planning piece, you're bringing up the next group of people to say, this organization is for you. And what I saw was that as you talk to different people, they'll say, because of the employee resource group, because of this, because of the women's network, I learned this, because of the Pride network, I learned this.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Because of the Veterans Network, I learned this. So each piece has this engagement. Penny, we can go to the next. So how many of you have heard the phrase representation matters? It's crucial. Now, when we talk about mentoring, representation matters because you need to have mentors from all stages, all levels. But the part that we talk about with mentoring that we sometimes lose in the transition is how much care matters. And I'm not speaking to just a general concern, but I am speaking to care from a heart moment. We usually look at mentoring like a head moment. Okay, I've got to make sure that this person comes along and they understand all the rules and regulations, and I got to push them forward. But care. You see, for mentoring, many organizations will just put an African-American person with an African-American person and not move past that. They'll put a Black male with a Black male and say, great, that's what we're going to go. They'll put a Hispanic female or a Latinx female with a Latinx female and just go beyond that, without recognizing if the mentor wants to be there. You see, for mentoring within organizations, it can't be just a checkbox situation. The mentor has to want to do it. Now, granted, if you can hook folks together from the same cultural backgrounds, the same ethnicities, in some cases, the same genders, even the same age range, it works. But what's more important is you have a mentor who wants to be there. So you can have someone who is white or a majority, as you may want to call it, mentoring someone who's African-American or Black. You can have them mentoring. You can have a male mentoring a female. You can have them if the mentor wants to do it. When mentoring doesn't work is when it just becomes rhetoric. When it just becomes, yes, I'm a mentor and I'm here. I want to stop right here really quick and just ask, but just by show of hands or show of reactions, how many of you all have formal mentoring programs within your organizations? Okay, Magna, I see you. Good, thank you. Okay, Shannon. Okay, so there are a few of you that have them. Now, I don't want you to answer this question because remember, this is recorded. So I want you to think about this. Was it a checkbox situation or did your mentor really mean it? And for those of you that says my mentors really mean it, how much more were you able to stay within that organization, or how much longer were you able to stay within that organization? Or did your mentor actually tell you, hey, this is what's next? This is what you should be waiting for. It's a different feel. And remember, we're talking about being positive, so that's why I didn't ask about the negative responses. But the idea is, if your mentor cares, if it counts, that's what makes a difference. Great job. Just more than a work friend. And I didn't frame it like that before, Angela, but I appreciate that. Your mentor has to be more than a work friend, right? Not someone you just see on a 9-to-5 that you can talk to and get coffee with. You have to really understand your mentor's Starbucks order. But more importantly, your mentor, you as the mentor, have to understand your mentee's Starbucks. So think about that as you go through, and this is why within organizations, it helps, especially for people from underrepresented communities. When you talk about folks with different orientation, it allows them to know that they can be out. Folks with different ability, whether they be neurodiverse or physically have that situation. It is this what makes us whole within the company, because we can be our whole selves. We can go to the next. So, nope, just pipelines, back up. Great. All right. Have any of you all seen this quote or heard this quote before? And I'm not picking on the banking industry, considering that we're going through all of this stuff right now, but it's an apropos comment to why people say things and how they feel sometimes. They say, well, I can't find enough women. I'm a fan. I listen to Sirius XM, not a commercial, but I listen to them. And one of the commercials they had said, there's no funny women in radio. So they created a channel to say, nope, this is it. But a lot of times, organizations work within the definition of insanity. Does anybody know what that is? And I know it's Sunday, but
Definitely do. Definitely do.
Say it again. Say it, then tell me what it is.
For me, it is doing the same thing the same way, expecting the same results.
You get the gold star. You get a gold star. We got tons of gold stars to give out. So, but you get a gold star today, right? Doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result. When we talk about recruiting, creating pipelines, we are doing the same thing the same way and think that we're going to solve all of our problems. We say we need more engineers, yet we still go to the same schools to get engineers. We need more women in business. We need more women in finance, but yet we still look at the same patterns of recruitment. We need more faculty members of color, and we still do the same things. What we have to do in this idea of pipelines is create new channels. It's almost like what I want to call an orchard theory. If you want different fruit, you have to plant different trees. You have to grow different fruits. You have to plant things different ways. And when your orchard doesn't produce the way you want it to, you have to turn the soil, plant different things. This is how you build up a new orchard. Pipelines can work the same way. Now, granted, the gentleman that made this speech, and just for full disclosure, did go back and apologize after people heard he said it. The key point is he said it first. This is not something that is unheard of within communities, as many of you said within the chat. What we have to be able to do in creating these pipelines is offer solutions. To be able to talk about not only going to HBCUs, but going to middle schools and elementary schools and high schools, looking for those different changes that we want to create. Creating a pipeline for a workforce doesn't mean starting at the sophomore year of college. Creating a pipeline for a workforce starts all the way down in the elementary and middle school levels when you're encouraging parents to talk to their students about careers and opportunities. So these are the things that how we can create these pipelines. Just trying to keep an eye on time. Okay, we'll go to the next. All right. What measures gets done? Many of you are working from academic backgrounds and working within school systems and even working in industry. And you know, when you can apply metrics to things, all of a sudden it becomes, oh my goodness, it works. When you can show things like the business case for diversity and say that it improves your output 5 to 7%. When you talk about the business case and says, well, our recruitment efforts have changed since we changed all the wordings in our document from he to they. When you start to put numbers to things, people pay attention. And remember, it's not about monumental gains. When you're working in the world of diversity, it's important to understand that this is a huge iceberg. And we're not pushing it along, but we're slowly moving it so we can navigate through rough seas and rough waters. It's important that we understand what metrics means. We have to determine what's our goal or what is key success for us. That's what's important. And so when you're looking at deadlines, as you tie it to metrics, you have to understand that deadlines should be fixed, but they also should have some flexibility or a grace period in that. If you say by 2024, we're going to have 40% women employees. Well, by 2024, if you're saying you're only at 20 or 25%, it's okay, because you might have been at 3% in the beginning, or you might have been at 10% in the beginning. You're now at 25%. Remember, you're adjusting because it didn't stop the metric. It didn't change anything. But what it did do was tell you where you are, where you want to go, and how you're going to get there. So creating this idea, Liv, and if I mispronounce that, and if while we're going through the conversation, please correct me if I mispronounce your name, but Liv, that's great. Because that's also one of the key issues with diversity, because a lot of times we say we're going to do something and it's going to be great and we're passionate about it. When we don't set the deadlines or don't provide the metrics, it immediately becomes dropped, right? We want to set those SMART goals. We want to set those goals that are measurable, achievable, and reasonable. If your organization has 2% diversity, it may not be reasonable to say we're going to get to 50% diversity in 3 years. It's reasonable to say, okay, we're going to grow 5 to 7%. And based on how that works, you can modify that. That's the whole idea of working within a deadline, to being flexible with your grace, to giving yourself a grace period and giving yourself grace. Diversity work is not easy. Timelines are fixed and solid and hard things. So sometimes you may need to revisit that. And then working with those SMART goals will allow you to make transitions and be successful in your efforts. We'll go to the next. And so as you're working through these things, one of the other things that's going to be important for you to understand is how your resources get played out. And when you're looking at what your resources are, and if I can get it, one of the things, Penny, if we go to the next slide, great. All right, so I'm going to take it back for a second. So I'm a little older than most of you all, as you can tell. I grew up in the 90s, and I grew up in New York. And so with that, hip hop is a big part of my life. And there was a group came out and they had a cream principle. And we'll go to the first bullet. And what I've modified and called it the cream principle. And if you don't know, I'll break it down. So cream stands for cash rules everything around. When you're doing diversity, diversity funding is usually the first thing to either get cut, or the budget is so small that the work that's able to be done doesn't really fit. It doesn't handle the scope of what you're trying to do. So when we speak to resources, it's important to understand that funding, money, is necessary. Positions need to have funding. So what do I mean by positions? Just employing people with a decent salary. When you want quality people, you have to pay quality wage. When you want quality programming, you have to install quality programming and quality programming cost. So it's important to understand these things. It's always used to having a night. Emily, absolutely correct. It's nice to have, but if we want the best, and I'm going to put this in the context of, I don't know, some universities, I'm not going to say any names. when they hire a coach, they don't offer him the least amount. They offer her the most that they can to be competitive. Word market value. If you want a quality diversity office, you have to put the funding to it. We'll go next. The growing and growing together, right? We all know the proverb, or we heard the proverb, if you want to go, there you go. Thanks, Dr. Rafa. If you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, you go together. What's important to understand when you're applying these resources, this is where the people metric comes in. And it doesn't just mean one group. To transition from talking about OD to going to civil rights, whenever these tasks or whenever these ideas of fights for diversity began, it wasn't just with one group. Even if you look at now, or the women's movement, or just the civil rights movement, or just the immigration movement, it's not just one group. It's a multicultural group working together. It is a kaleidoscope of people working together for one task. And they're all looking out for each other. So when you're implementing diversity in your organizations, it's not the responsibility of one office, one people, one group. It's everybody's collective responsibility to get engaged and to make these things happen. We'll go to the next bullet. And lastly, materials and stuff. Just like we have these backgrounds behind us, it's okay to recognize diversity within your organization. One of the things that we don't do enough in diversity is celebrate it. We talk about it. Definitely, we make sure that we're compliant to it, but celebrating it, engaging it, and not just during February, not just during October, not just wearing pink, but year round. Putting materials to it, not just in June when it's Pride Month and we can all wave a flag and wave either the regular flag or the progressive flag. We can get engaged every day. And it's little things that you do, from running a quick blurb on a digital display to actually engaging speakers to come in at lunchtime conversations. But every day, every way, we can constantly put out materials and make, even down to making the pins. For example, Ralph Lauren did a red, black, and green pin with polo on. It's something to say, hey, we're here. We wear our ribbons for breast cancer awareness. We are proud to be diverse when somebody is watching. We should always be putting resources to it. We should always be engaging along these lines. We'll go to the next. And observations. All right. How many of you all like to cook? It'll make sense. Trust me, just go with it. Can you think about the last time you had a really good meal and they said, oh, I'm going to make it this way? Think about the last time you had a meal that wasn't as great. And it was something that you thought you made well. Well, think about it from this perspective. When we talk about diversity, we always highlight what everybody did right. What's also important to realize is looking at our friends, our competitors, when they made the mistakes and not being so egotistical that we don't say that can't happen to us. Not being so above it all that we think, oh, no, that'll never happen here. If it happened there, it can happen here. Just like we monitor states, remember the first question I asked about woke. Florida, then Texas, then North Carolina, then Tennessee. Pennsylvania may not be too far away. It is important to understand what they did right as much as what they did wrong. And when you see someone doing something wrong, it's okay to do a self-check. What did we do? What are we doing that could make us switch? What are we doing that could make us stumble a little bit? Is there a place where we don't have it all together? I wanted to put the quote here. I don't know who Scott McCloud is, but when I was working this through, I saw this. Learn from everyone, follow no one, watch for patterns. See how the climate is, read the room, read the environment. and then work like hell to make sure you're not making a mistake. Diversity has never been about resting on laurels. We can all do the magazine shot and sing Kumbaya and hold hands. That's not diversity. Diversity is doing the work, getting up, getting dressed, going out there and fighting the good fight. And believe me, not every day is going to be joyous. But the idea is we are making it better for the next group of folks that come behind us. So in that, work like hell. Next slide. And the last thing, you only can do this work if you understand where you have been and where you're coming from. Remember initially when I talked about defining pieces for success, the idea for success does not equate with everything. Ivan's identity for success may not be Kristen's, which may not be Lori's, and the organizations might be different. To put it back on the impact of departments in terms of colleges, if you would look at the College of Business, our goals are different from the College of Education in terms of diversity, which are different from the College of Nursing. It doesn't mean that we all can't be successful. It means we have to understand where we are starting, where we are engaging. And in that, once we can say, okay, here are our success, not our success factors, but just what do we mean as success? We have to know where we are right now, and it may not be a good place. This might also mean you need to bring in someone from outside of your organization to review what you're doing. Now, the word is audit. I know that word makes people nervous, but an audit is okay. Sometimes an audit can be like Robitussin. All right, so I know many of you may not have heard. How many folks have heard of what Robitussin is? Penny, I appreciate you. It is a horrible tasting medicine if you don't know what it is, but it works. And sometimes we have to get that medicine. Sometimes we have to figure out, okay, this is where we are. I thought we were better. Maybe we're not. But this is how we're going to engage. This is what we need to do next. And so once we know where we are, then we can set realistic and obtainable goals. We can begin to understand what we need to do. And this, by setting these goals of knowing who we are, this means reviewing all of our practices. What do our job opportunities look like? Do they always say he? Do they say his? He will. They have been. When we're looking at these, are we taking blind applications? Meaning, are we pulling names off? Are we taking college names off in order to increase what our yield is? Because remember, when we're doing the employment hiring, we always say we want to increase our diversity numbers. One of the first things that someone in HR does is they look at college level attainment to make sure it matches. Do you need to know what college they're from? And in some cases, you may say yes. Some cases, it might be down to Jamie and Kevin, so you want to see. That's okay. But to start, we just want to know if Amal is qualified for the position. We just want to know, has Angela done some of this work before? So these different things mean something to us. And as we do that, we know and we continue to walk on this path. We continue to engage. We continue to do things differently. And someone said earlier that diversity, we always change it really quick. Sometimes we do. But in the instance where we said, okay, that's who we were, this is who we're trying to be. Using the word aspirational, not inspirational, aspirational. What do we want to become? We'll go to the next. And so also another way to identify this, and they told me to cut down my slides because I had like 10 more for this, but the idea is we want to do this thing where we've come up through research. We call it a CAT model for supporting diversity. Culture, accountability, and transparency. In each of this, it's about 15 different themes for each of these individual pieces. But culture will affect everything. Culture is the big cog in this. Because as you talk about culture, it works in a manner where you just say, okay, if this is who we say we are, how are we demonstrating? Remember, I used the example of the iceberg earlier in the massive weight of it. Culture is that. How many of you all in your organizations identify what your diversity culture is? Or even can? And I don't see anything. I'm trying to see my chat. Okay. So when you're talking about diversity in the organization, understanding that culture of it, do we always rely on, do we always rely on the oldest person in the room, the more seasoned person in the room to speak up? Are young folks heard at the table? Do we look at folks who are not from our area or from different countries? Are they able to speak? Looking at these things, which goes into the idea of accountability. Accountability at the top. Just like we said, in order to move diversity forward, it has to begin at the top. Accountability also has to begin at the top. When we look at our folks who are leading us, are they doing and saying? Because the saying part is easy, but are they doing the things that we need to see done to prove that diversity is important? It's okay to come and give a good speech, but then are they doing the other pieces of it? Are they talking about the hiring sides? Are they focusing at what all it could mean? And better yet, are they asking the question of the people? Are they asking the questions of the members of the organization? What do we need to do? What do we need to focus on? Think about it. You can think your area of concern as a leader is one thing, the presenting problem, but it truly could be the underlying problem that's engaging what you're going through. So are you talking to the different folks? Are you engaged with the different folks? And when something goes wrong, how are you determining what makes them accountable? Are you pulling budgets? Are you increasing or decreasing budget based on these activities? Lastly, transparency. Now, when it comes to transparency, it's about what we see. And what does that mean? That could mean when you're doing your hiring that there's a flat range or there's a set amount. When it comes to promotion, is it an easy way to see what an individual needs to be promoted? An organization that I had an opportunity to work with literally had a plastic roadmap that said in year 1 through 3, year 3 through 5, years 6 through 9, that gave an incoming person the opportunity to understand what was needed to do to move to the next level at each step. You see, a lot of times when we talk about promoting from within or promoting different orientation, different gender, different ethnic background, some of the rules are not always clearly defined. Some of the things are moving goalposts. And as that occurs, the people who are facing this they get a little disappointed, don't want to say disgruntled, but they may do this thing known as quiet quitting because they are not seeing the transparency in moving up in activities, in the programming that they need to do to feel like they're a part of the organization. Now, I've talked quite a bit, and I wanted to run through or go through this first because I really wanted to take questions and answers, and we can go to the next slide because I think that should cover us right about there. I do want to say thank you, and I also want to make a push for my work, and I appreciate the conference for allowing me to tuck that little slide in. This next week, we're having our diversity conference. It'll be on Thursday. It'll be right at the hub, and you all are welcome to come. Definitely free lunch and get engaged. You can take the QR code or just, we can talk about it when we get to the Q&A. But I wanted to stop here. So Penny, we can stop the share. Oh, wait, no, we got the last QR code to come. The last slide with the other QR codes for the conference. Do you still need that? Yeah, so I wanted to make sure that we pointed out the QR codes for this session. But at this point, I wanted to open it out for question and answer so we could really begin the conversation. Because as you know, with this principle of OD, we have to come up with our own solutions. We are basically the solution that we seek. So based on everything you did, oh, Penny, you put in milestones. I didn't see that till just now, which is also a great way to look at it. Doc, you just came on camera. Did you have any questions?
Yes, I was going to raise my hand and ask you, with what's going on in Florida, what do you think is the appropriate response to this Ron DeSantis view that Florida is where woke goes to die? How do we respond to that mentality?
So, and that's a great question, and that's where we started. So I appreciate bringing us back, because the idea is words carry weight. They mean something. And when you say woke, you have to make sure that people understand what woke means. It's like when they say critical race theory and everybody gets nervous. So the question about what should we do? First, we can allow people to say whatever they want. We can give them the reign of free speech. We have to be prepared to combat that. What does that mean? That might mean that we don't go to Disneyland or Disney World. I always get those confused. That might mean.
But Jamie, isn't the issue also that if we are true to our spirit of celebrating diversity, we have to recognize that even people who don't want to celebrate diversity have a viewpoint?
Mm-hmm. No, and that's absolutely correct. The idea is, when we talk to folks like that, this is where you start to have the conversation of what's next. When you look at folks who don't want to celebrate diversity, this is where you have to beat them with numbers. So this goes to the idea of the business case for diversity, and start talking to them about market share and their wallet and how their competitors are leaving them behind. And because it's Florida, I want to use the example of football, because initially African-American players couldn't compete with NCAA at NCAA schools. It wasn't until somebody from Alabama got beat by a Black athlete. I mean, he was on a team, of course, but got beat by a Black athlete, that he came back and said, look, I need to get guys like that. This engagement of, when you start to lose space in the marketplace, nobody wants to be BlackBerry. When you start to lose space in the marketplace, that's what makes people wake up and say, okay, I need to be like so-and-so. I need to change. So even when they don't want to do it, sometimes it's not about what they want to do. It's about what they need to do to exist. Because I mentioned BlackBerry. BlackBerry thought it was the greatest thing since a Butterol, but they never changed until it was too late. By the time they changed, they were surpassed by iPhone, by Apple, and Samsung, and LG, and T-Mobile for their phone carrying plans. RIM is still a great company in Canada, but the stuff that they do here in the States, it didn't work. It's still used by government, but very small in terms of impact. So when you're talking to people that don't want to get with diversity or don't want to outwardly agree to it, you speak to them from what matters to them. What's the WFM for them? And for a lot of those folks, they're doing a lot of the same things that we've seen before. They're talking about their fabric of their social fabric is changing. They're losing out. They're not understanding.
That's what scares them, and some of them rational arguments won't work.
Well,
if you've ever talked to a Trump supporter and tried to make the case for other viewpoints, you'll quickly discover that they don't want to hear anything.
And you do that by making sure that they're aware that these could affect them later. So when they say, oh, no, this is changing our lives. And so you ask them, well, what happens when you become a minority? Because we know, based on census data, those that consider themselves majority now, 2050, probably going to be minority. So what happens when you do this? You want us to set these things right. So
that takes you right into replacement theory. So
if in that idea of replacement theory, we're not pushing back and we're not saying, you're not, how do I say this nicely? You're not replacing anyone because we're already here. We can't say we're going back and we're leaving. We're here now. What's important for your organization to understand is that if it doesn't change, If it doesn't make these adjustments, it won't be able to exist. Doc, you know, when we talk about succession planning, even if you put each individual in charge and say, okay, for the next 10 years, this is what it's going to look like. People often will look at your organization and look at your board. They will look at those pictures on the wall and say, I don't want to work for that company because I don't see me. And in some cases, even if they see someone that looks like them, they may say, I don't know them and I don't feel comfortable with it. And the next generations coming behind us, they're not just looking at what bottom lines are. So when he says, when woke goes to die, and what I was going to say right before we got in, elections have consequences. So we have to vote. We have to encourage people to vote, and we have to look at those states that we don't live in, like Texas, like Florida, like Tennessee, because Tennessee just enacted a policy against folks of different orientation. We have to look at that and say, what are we going to do? Who are we going to put pressure on to change? I would equate this similar to what happened with Coke in the late 80s, early 90s with the apartheid pulling out. We can put pressure on these organizations. Now, granted, Florida is a whole state, and it's going to get real interesting, Florida and Texas, because Abbott and DeSantis are doing things. We're just paying attention to DeSantis right now because he's making more noise. But Abbott is doing things just as well. Mm-hmm. Houston's taking over a school district. The state's taking over a school district. So we have to be cognizant of these things, and we have to figure out how we're going to put pressure. Again, it's not a one person, one group situation. We have to come together collectively and figure that out. Liv, I see your hand as well.
I'm glad we're having this conversation. I'm in education, and that's where I'm strong, because creativity is what I do. Innovation is the result I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. However, when I look at our education system and the way we are doing things, we are not creating logical thinkers. Mm-hmm. And that's where I wish we would fight harder as educators. Let us create people who can think, because mm-hmm. once you create a person who thinks, the mindset of a community changes. Mm-hmm. And we're too quick to, our job is like, oh, we need to finish this. Oh, we need to finish a curriculum. Oh, we need to finish a syllabus. And the radicalism of education is not happening. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I say we need to come back to is spend more time in the classroom, creating people who can think for themselves, who will become culturally minded, who will realize their diversity and resist that fear that is being put within us, that we need to come out and change our own communities.
So you mean like critical thinkers?
Like, exactly.
So they think you're saying critical theory.
Yeah.
They think you're saying critical theory.
But you have this, and you say, right, critical theory. There's critical theory, each part of it, right? Because you have to be able to think, but we teach to a test.
Yes.
Which causes us to do the same thing over and over again.
So I'm not going to say where I am right now, but I can tell you I've been tested from February to yesterday. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what I keep asking, I'm new in the system, I'm new in the area that I am. And what I'm like, I took a 6-year hiatus, I came back in, and I couldn't believe education had gone so wrong. I'm like,
we won't say wrong, but we'll say changing to a different time.
Okay, changing to a different time. But are we really understanding whose education it is and why we are educating people? Because that's a question I always ask at meetings, and people get uncomfortable when I say that. Whose education is it? Is it the state education? Is it the administration education? Or is it the education of the students? Whose education is it? Who are we educating, and why are we educating them? It's my question.
So I want to point out something, because you just said something very strong and very positive. What you said was the uncomfortability of it, being uncomfortable. And Angela, I saw your comment. I'm going to get to that in a second. But I want to stay on this point, because One of the misconceptions about diversity is that it's supposed to be warm and fuzzy. It's supposed to be comfortable. It is not. Diversity really speaks to the idea of civility and respect and understanding, not sympathy, but empathy. Diversity speaks to us being able to engage. So when you speak to that, a lot of people get nervous and they say, well, it makes me uncomfortable. It is, back to Dr. Rothwell's point of the idea of woke and it dying, because people are saying, oh, you're killing away who I am, without acknowledging that. But it's just like when someone says, I don't see you as a Black person, I see you as a human being. You can't kill that off. I am who I am. So the idea is we have to understand, and we have to get people to understand that diversity work is hard work. Diversity work is work. It's not play, it's not a game. We engage to make positive change, and we engage to make things successful for individuals. So let me get to this idea. And if you all didn't see Angela's quote, it says, does resistance and backlash to DEIB indicate a degree of success of approaching a tipping point or a red flag warning? I'm gonna waffle. I'm gonna say it does both. And I'm gonna waffle because on the positive, it tells us that what we're doing is making an impact. It is making people feel more comfortable about speaking and, more importantly, about being themselves in the workplace. Remember, the whole reason and rationale for this conference is talking about what we're going to do with the workforce, what we're going to do in the workplace, not just from small techniques, but from big ideas, big thoughts. So if we can continue to educate, it does. But to the second part of Dr. Rothwell's comment, it makes people think. And the last thing people want to do is say, oh, I'm this. Like, they don't want to have the is on the end of their name. The racist, misogynist, chauvinist, well, that's a tick. But they don't want to have those, the anti-Semitic, the anti-faith. They don't want to have those knots on their name. So, but when they think about it, say, oh my goodness, that's how I've been acting, and you're showing it to me. That's why when we talked about those indicators, those success indicators or factors, the ideas of having those resource groups where you can speak under anonymity, but speak to someone in the C-suite. The engagement is what's important. When you talk about those timelines, showing people that we're going to do this in 6 months, we're going to reevaluate, so that by the end of the year, we can say, okay, we've done X, Y, Z, and putting the resources to it. It doesn't matter if it's a resource just to say celebrate. Oh, wow, Angela, I have to stop my whole train of thought behind that question. All right. If you all haven't, no, don't be sorry, it's a good question, because it leads to another point. So the idea of white fragility, right? And this speaks to, and I'm gonna just be blunt before Penny tells me I gotta go. So it just deals with white folks saying, oh my gosh, they're talking about me. No, we're not. You might be being a little sensitive right now, but we're not. We're speaking to the issue that occurs. And when I say we, I'm talking about persons of color. I'm talking about people of different orientation and different gender. Because sometimes in that fragility, I'm just covering all the bases of diversity. But here's another point to also talk about in this idea of white fragility. There is also Black fragility. There is also Latinx fragility. There is also orientation fragility. There is that POC or that BIPOC fragility where people are tired of saying, oh my God, I'm Black, or being that one Black friend in a room. Unfortunately, well, fortunately, for many of you all, I'm okay with doing that because that's part of my job description. So I'm ready to do that. I have to do that. But not everybody wants to do that. Not everybody wants to be your one Muslim friend. Not everybody wants to be your one Jewish friend. Not everybody wants to be your one friend that came from poverty. They want to be able to move beyond that. But in terms of this idea of fragility, we're all there. And really, we talk about diversity fatigue. So Angela, that's kind of where that goes. It goes to everybody being tired. White males in particular are being tired of being told that, oh my God, they're wrong. Black males in particular are being tired of told you're a victim or this is going to happen because you didn't have this. When I was, don't worry about it now. When you talk about these other things, you say all these different spaces of people being fragile, but maybe it's not fragile. Maybe it's a fatigue. Maybe it's a sensitivity. Maybe it's, I'm not like this. Why are you looking at me like that? It is no different than when I have on my hood and jeans and people are like, oh my gosh, look how well you are. Look how well spoken you are. Really? Is that how we're going to go today? The idea of fatigue. It's being tired. It's being in that emotional space of being beat up. Now, I'm not defending white fragility. I'm not that guy. I am saying this is what it is. This is why people act this way. And we don't have enough time to go through all of the ideas behind it and understanding of it. So understand, I'm just taking a 20-second push through on it. But I also want to understand with white fragility, there is Black fatigue. I also want to understand that women may be tired of always having to identify and explain why they are valid in certain spaces. As I said, I didn't say, but in one of the slides said, I'm a father of 3 girls. I can't have them going into the workplace always having to worry about if they're being paid on level. It's kind of my job to make sure that people know they should be paid on level. So when we talk about these things, when we're engaging, we have to make sure that we're dealing with fatigue, fragility, and all of these things coming together. We also have to look at how we're educating people. And so Liv, I'm just saying it's Liv, and I'm hoping I'm saying that right. I don't know if it's the Y in front.
It's actually I live. It looks like a double L, but it's an L and an I, and it's pronounced as is.
Thank you. So it's important to take all of these things into consideration. I've also heard ICE call it racial battle fatigue. Yeah, but that's an immigration problem. Right? That's understanding what happens at those individual borders to those individuals of why they're trying to come here. It also does put stress on those resources, but again, why are folks trying to come here? Why are folks making these treks, life-threatening treks?
I am glad you said that because I teach immigrants, and that's the conversation we were having on Friday. And I had to make them understand that no one wants to leave their homes. No one wants to leave their freedoms, but we move for economic and peaceful reasons. That's why we move. So people
we're engaging,
why.
My fault. Finish what you were saying.
Yeah, so I said that why do we have immigrants risking lives to do this? And I always use the Haitian mother with a baby of 2 months on a small boat, leaving Haiti and crossing the Atlantic Ocean to find herself to the US, or maybe go all the way through Chile, all the way with a child, with a little infant child, all the way up to the United States. Why? And that's critical. If you can understand, I am so desperately in need of something that I have to do this, then it brings a different idea as to how you would see immigration. And
so when we're engaging, thank you. So when we're engaging all of these things, remember these things still translate back to the workplace. You're looking at now migrant labor, transient labor, how these folks are getting jobs, how these folks are needed. Remember, we lost tons of crops in the South because they didn't have people to pick, to pull, to engage. Why? Because those workers who usually made the trek up could no longer come. So that's a systemic problem. And again, systemic icebergs. And I'm hesitant to use the word Titanic, right? Because we know what happened to the Titanic in the end. So icebergs. We want to make sure that we shift, that we can melt, that we can grow, we can change, we can engage these things. All right, Penny, I'm looking at 4 minutes. Am I okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So we want to make sure that in doing all of this, we're not resting on laurels, that we're not also just chasing windmills. We're not Don Quixote in this thing. We're looking at specific things we can challenge and deal with. So immigration, what does that mean for places like the Texas, the Florida? People don't realize the Michigan, the New Yorks, where folks are coming in. Because immigration doesn't just happen south of Texas. Immigration happens all over the country. So what are we doing to make these things right? So within your organizations, again, that employee resource group, that idea of pipelining, what does this mean in each shot? What does this mean in each occasion? All right, Menard, I saw you come on. I didn't know if you had something to say or you just came back on and I didn't want to forget you.
No, she would just, I think we need to go to break now because
Oh.
we, yeah.
Oh, right. Okay.
Yeah, so, but you're a brilliant presentation, very thought-provoking and engaging. And
Yes.
I love your name.
Thank you.
So
I live by that name, trust
Yeah,
me.
beautiful.
I celebrate it on a daily
Yeah.
basis.
so
Yes,
if
thank you for
you
great
have-
conversation. This was fabulous.
If
Yeah.
any of you have any questions or even if you just want to talk, remember being politically correct is not always the friend of diversity either. So if you just want to have a conversation, I'm open to do it. I see my red sign up. So I'm going to just simply say thank you. I enjoyed and appreciate all of you coming. Thank you for the questions and engagement.
Yeah, thank you. So we need to be back at, we'll start again at 3:40. In the rooms 1 or 2, Christy Rosen will be presenting in room 1 and Dr. Gabriella Richard in room 2. So we see all of you back here shortly. Thank you.